Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mark Goldfarb, and I'm one of the senior managing directors at SS&G. And I have the honor to introduce the next few speakers. But before I do, I just want to thank John Spurk for an enlightening presentation. I had no idea all of the innovation with all those products that Nottingham and Spurk did. But it's easy to see how John and his partner, John Nottingham, have become nationally recognized as innovation leaders. And it's fascinating to read and hear and actually see the Nottingham Spurk Innovation Center. It's really cool. But now we're going to commence with our afternoon program, and our first speaker is Larry Goddard, who is the managing partner of SS&G Parkland. And as Gary said earlier, Larry is the brains and the vision behind today's event. And I know, talking to him almost daily, he has worked many months to meticulously plan this program and recruit most of our sponsors and speakers. Larry founded the Parkland Group in 1989, and it quickly became a leading management and turnaround consulting firm here in northeastern Ohio. And as was mentioned earlier, our consulting divisions at SS&G, specifically our litigation support and business valuation divisions, merged in July of 2012 with the Parkland Group to form SS&G Parkland. Larry was born and educated in South Africa and began his business career as an accountant at Price Waterhouse. He later served as the CEO of a construction equipment company based in Houston, where he led the acquisition of 10 companies and grew the company to over $100 million in revenue. Larry has consulted with hundreds of companies and is the author, as Gary mentioned before, of 3 books on business improvement, which, if you're interested, I think Gary said he has a couple of copies, but you can actually buy them on Amazon.com. And over the past few years, I've read 2 of them, those being The Turbocharged Company and Top-Down Vision and Bottom-Up Management, and they're great resources for anyone in business, and I highly recommend them. They're really a great read. Larry is also the inventor of the patented SOAR to Strategic Excellence, which is a business diagnostic and improvement process. And he also recently won the 2012 Lifetime Achievement Award from the Turnaround Management Association of Northern Ohio. So Larry's going to talk to us today about growing a business in a slow growth economy. Please help me welcome Larry Goddard.
Well, thank you very much, Mark. I'm incredibly proud of our recent merger and association with SS&G. Their commitment to client success is truly amazing. The merger made great sense because we had the same goals: to offer our clients cutting-edge business improvement tools. I'm also extremely honored to have partnered with SS&G to put on this great event today. And I really want to thank all of you for taking the time to be here today. It means a tremendous amount to me. Most businesses strive for sales growth. But in today's slow growth economy, sales growth is just not that easy to achieve. And if you're not happy with your company or your business's sales growth, the last person you should blame is the salesperson. Sure, it's very tempting to blame the salesperson, and most of us do it on a regular basis. I've heard many CEOs blame their lack of sales success on their sales team on a regular basis. If only my sales team would work a little harder and knock on more doors, we could be more successful, they complain. But the salesperson is the last person you should blame. 10 or 15 years ago, sales growth was a lot easier. In those days, mediocre companies could grow fairly easily. In today's world, even good companies are struggling to grow. In a slow-growth economy, it takes a lot more than knocking on more doors to achieve sales growth. Leaders have to provide salespeople with the right strategy and execution to facilitate sales growth. Sales success requires having the right balance of strategy and execution. There's always been the age-old debate about what's more important for business success, strategy or execution. The reality is they're both equally important and both vitally important. The right strategy makes success easier to attain, but the right execution makes your chosen strategy easier to accomplish. And if you don't have the right sales strategy and execution, the last people you should be blaming is your sales team. What would you think of a military general who sent his soldiers into battle without good intelligence, without a battle plan, without the right weapons, and without good training? You would think he's sending them on an impossible mission, wouldn't you? And would you blame those soldiers for losing? Well, the same applies in business. A business leader who sends his sales team into battle without the right strategy and execution could be sending them on an impossible mission and should not blame them if they're unsuccessful. Today, I'm going to focus on the strategy side of the scale, and Jill Mason-Miller, our next speaker, will focus on the execution side. The first key aspect of having a strategy for sales success is to ensure the business has a downhill ride. A downhill ride is an external market that's conducive to success. Essentially, it's a market that makes success much easier to attain. An uphill ride, on the other hand, can be a constant slog. Businesses can outpedal an uphill ride for a while, but eventually, if they keep pedaling uphill, corporate exhaustion will set in. Think about whether you'd rather ride a bike uphill or downhill. Business strategy is very similar. A downhill ride is a lot easier than an uphill ride. Steering towards downhill rides is something we as business leaders should be thinking about all the time. There are 4 major criteria for a downhill ride, and we use a 1 to 5 rating scale to help businesses evaluate whether they have downhill rides. For example, this company operates in 3 markets. They enjoy a strong downhill ride in power tools, a moderate uphill ride in motors, and a steep uphill ride in supplies. Their sales team had a much harder time being successful in motors and supplies. To counteract this, they expanded their distribution channels for motors and supplies. Previously, they had sold exclusively through distributors. They then began to also sell direct to OEMs. This offered higher sales and margin opportunities and allowed them to turn motors and supplies into a downhill ride. Unfortunately, very few downhill rides last forever. Businesses have to constantly evaluate their products and their markets to ensure that they are still downhill rides. You can have a downhill ride and lose it. In fact, most of the companies on the screen at one point had very strong downhill rides and then lost them. I'm sure you'll all agree that even a salesperson with the skill of Zig Ziglar would have difficulty being successful selling Yellow Pages typewriters or payphones in today's market. The key is to face up to reality. If you don't have a downhill ride, it's very important to acknowledge this, and it's important to challenge yourself and your team to change this. Valiantly slogging uphill or praying for a miracle is really not a very good solution. Some businesses have been very successful creating downhill rides or even turning uphill rides into downhill rides. And there are at least 5 different ways to create a downhill ride. Netflix completely redefined the delivery of videos and sent Blockbuster into bankruptcy as part of the process. Aspirin was hurting as a painkiller, but became a huge success as a heart health product. In the 70s and 80s, when every other airline was losing money, Southwest Airlines was growing and was profitable. Their lower cost structure allowed them to sell tickets at less than half the price of their major competitors. Because of this, they were able to take a significant amount of business away from their competitors, and they also were able to expand the market by appealing to people who otherwise might have driven their own car or taken the bus. I'm sure you all remember the days when it only cost a little over $100 to fly on Southwest from Cleveland to Chicago. And I'm sure you'd all agree that it probably cost at least that much to drive your car. Twitter, on the other hand, created a brand new high-growth market that didn't exist just a few years ago. And the major airlines used industry consolidation and reduction of capacity to create their downhill rides. So if your business doesn't have a downhill ride, these are some of the things you should be exploring to create one. Even if businesses are lucky enough to be operating in a downhill ride, not all segments of a downhill ride might be in a company's sweet spot. For example, just because the automotive industry is back in a growth mode today doesn't mean that every segment of the automotive industry is right for every supplier. Businesses need to find their sweet spot and focus on it. Sweet spot's a fairly commonly used term in the business world, but most businesses don't have a clear understanding of what it means or how to use it to their advantage. We define a company's sweet spot as selling ideal products to ideal customers. And in order for a business to aim for its sweet spot, it's very important for businesses to clearly define their ideal products and ideal customers. And our experience is that very few businesses do this effectively. And when they do define ideal products and customers, we usually find that they're lucky if 25% of their sales is in their sweet spot. Think about this. This means 75% of what they do is outside of their sweet spot. Can you really blame salespeople for being unsuccessful if 75% of what they do is selling non-ideal products to non-ideal customers? Companies that can grow their sweet spot to more than 75% will find sales success a lot easier to attain. The benefits to the company can be enormous. We had a client that increased their bottom line by $1 million in less than 6 months by focusing on their sweet spot. As soon as they defined their ideal products and their ideal customers, it became very clear which ones were out of their sweet spot, and growing their sweet spot was not that difficult to accomplish. They did this by focusing on customers that offered true profitability, after taking into account a concept called costs to serve, which are the headache costs involved in taking care of customers. I'm sure you guys all know about this, and I'm sure you all have customers that create those kind of headaches. And usually those headache costs are not accounted for in cost of goods sold, and they're usually buried somewhere in SG&A. Now, you could actually have two very similar customers that both buy $1 million a year from you, that buy the exact same products and pay the exact same prices, and yet your true profitability from those two customers could be very different if one has a high cost to serve and one has a low cost to serve. And this concept can have a huge impact on deciding which customers are in your sweet spot and which customers you should be focusing on. Value proposition is one of the most important keys to sales success. Value propositions are the compelling reasons why customers should buy from you. It's how you differentiate yourself from your competition. It's very easy for businesses to convince themselves that they are unique. In fact, almost every company that I consult to believes that they're unique. But generally, often customers don't see the difference. Many companies say their differentiator is their people, but they can't really articulate why their people are any better than the competition's people. And they spend little to no money on training or development to ensure that their people are really better. Many businesses say service is their differentiator, but they cannot document why their service is any better than the competition's, and many of the competitors frequently make the same claim. If you send a salesperson on a sales call without a truly compelling value proposition, can you really blame them if they come home empty-handed? Value propositions are generally derived from a concept we call reasons to thrive, also known as competitive advantages. And there are two kinds of reasons to thrive. There are product reasons to thrive. Those are the reasons to thrive that are derived from something related to your product. And there are non-product reasons to thrive. And there are four different kinds of product and non-product reasons to thrive. Every business should choose the value proposition that is right for them. Walmart focuses on lower cost and lower prices as their value proposition. Pfizer relied on intellectual property to sell a lot of drugs like Lipitor. Amazon wins because it's just so easy to do business with them. And in the cell phone business, 5 years ago, BlackBerry had a compelling value proposition because of their vastly superior features and benefits. A few years ago, they ceded that dominant position to the iPhone. Now, Droid appears to be edging out the iPhone for the compelling value proposition position. Without a compelling value proposition, businesses are generally restricted to growing at no more than the market growth rate. I think this is a very important point, and I'm going to repeat it. Without a compelling value proposition, businesses are generally restricted to growing at no more than the market growth rate. And with a compelling value proposition, businesses can grow faster than the market growth rate and can also counteract an uphill ride. That's another very important point. With a compelling value proposition, even if you operate in a market that's an uphill ride, you can somewhat counteract that uphill ride with a compelling value proposition. This makes value proposition a crucial element of strategy. And because value propositions are so important, businesses should invest significant time and energy in training their salespeople, and in fact, all of your people, and how to understand and use the value proposition, and also how to adapt the value proposition to the needs of specific customers, because not all customers value the same things, and value propositions have to be adapted to different customers. Growth doesn't happen by itself. It has to be carefully planned and orchestrated. There are about 20 different ways a business can grow, and every business has to figure out the best growth path for them. And we have developed a tool called the Growth Engine to help businesses figure out the right growth path for them. I know this is probably a little small and you probably can't read all of it. The important point is that businesses should always pursue easier growth opportunities before tackling the hard ones. The opportunities at the top of the growth engine are easier than those at the bottom. The easiest way to grow is if the market is growing. If your market is growing at 10%, you should be able to also grow at 10% unless you have an inferior value proposition. Unfortunately, most of us here today probably don't have that luxury of having a market that's growing at 10%. The most neglected part of the growth engine is customer retention. It's a lot easier to avoid losing a customer than it is to getting a new one. And yet, most companies put a lot more time and effort into trying to get new customers than trying to keep the ones they have. Businesses should work very hard at keeping current customers satisfied. And the first part of any sales plan should be the customer retention plan. That's the first thing any salesperson should be challenged to do. What are you doing about keeping customers? And what's our company's strategy and plan to make sure that our good customers are very, very happy? The next easiest way to grow is wallet share growth, which means getting a bigger share of your customers' spending dollars. So let's say you sell $1 million of a product to a company, and you find out that they're actually buying a total of $5 million in total of that product. That means you have a 20% wallet share. 1 million out of 5 million is a 20% wallet share. Figuring out how to grow your wallet share with that customer and all of your other ideal customers is the best way to grow. It's easier to grow wallet share because you're already known to those customers and hopefully trusted by those customers. Market share growth, which basically means stealing customers away from your competitors, is much tougher. You have to get your foot in the door and earn the trust. And also, to grow market share, you generally need a strong value proposition. Think about it. Why would a company let you get your foot in the door if all you were offering was something comparable or inferior to their existing suppliers? Businesses need to very carefully plan where their growth is going to come from, and the growth engine can be a very valuable tool to do this. And to successfully execute your sales strategy, your salespeople need to have a very clear understanding of what your growth engine is and how to execute it. My goal today has been to show you that there's a lot more to sales success than just knocking on more doors. and that businesses need to give their salespeople better odds of winning by having the right strategy for sales success. Ask yourself if you really have a downhill ride, and do you really understand and focus on your sweet spot, and do you truly have a compelling value proposition and a precise and focused growth engine. And yes, we all have bad salespeople, underperforming salespeople. But before you point the finger of blame at your sales team, ask yourself if you've given your sales team the right strategy for sales success. And even if you have the right strategy for sales success is not assured unless you also have the right execution. Superior execution is very important because it's going to help you make your strategy easier to attain, but it can also counteract weaknesses in your downhill ride and your value proposition. And the subject of superior execution will be dealt with in much greater detail by our next speaker, Jill Mason-Miller. I would like to thank all of you for attending this very exciting event and be happy to address any questions.